Good morning. So today is Chaf of the 20th of yard site of the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneersohn, who I have the privilege of being named for. So that was named after. Thank you. So I wanted to find something from the Rebbe's father to honor his yard site, as was the Rebbe's request. I think I wrote in a note there, copying from what the Rebbe had said famously in 1984. He said, "It's my privilege and duty to ask, to request, suggest," and never wrote etc. and then underlined, that everyone learned from his father's teachings on the day of his father's yard site. The Fabrengen actually never said that. We can't know what the etc. is, but it's to my duty and privilege to ask, to suggest, etc. underlined, that everyone learned from his teachings. I'm assuming that the etc. is more than it's indicating that there's more that he'd like to say than just suggest and ask. It's like something exactly something that he really expects, wants, appreciates, and so on. So certainly it's our sacred duty and privilege to learn from the Rebbe's father's Torah and honoring both the Rebbe and the Rebbe's father. So I want to find something that was related to what we were learning. So I tried looking to see if there's any notes on the pages of the Gemara that we're currently learning. Didn't find, but I found some notes from the Rebbe's father on SHEL BROCHO, which is what we're learning about, right? The cup of Kiddush, the cup of Bechet HaMazon, the cup of Havdalah, and the laws related to that. So I did find some notes from the Rebbe's father on that, and a little bit linking that idea of SHEL BROCHO to specifically the 4 cups of wine of the Seder night, which is more broadly speaking the subject of our Gemara learning. So that's what we're going to look at today. And just on the first page, I put a picture of Reb Levi, so you can kind of see who he is. This is his arrest picture, like his mugshot. He was arrested by the Soviets for his counter-revolutionary activities in promoting Yiddishkeit in communist Russia. And then on the right side, you can see a picture of a book. That's a book of the Zohar. And on the margins, you can see notes in purple and red. And that's because after being sent to exile by the communists, his wife decided to move out with him into exile. His wife, Rebbe Tzimchana, his mother, and she brought with her a number of books for her husband to learn from. And when they were there, she made it her mission to make ink out of berries that were available. And therefore, the color of the ink is dependent on what kind of berries happened to be available and what color they were. And that's why they look like that. It's a very nice thing. It's a very romantic story to start with. You know, his wife moves out there, and romantic both in the sense that it's a dedication of a wife to her husband, but also in the broader sense. It's a very beautiful story that pulls at the strings of the heart, where someone's stuck in exile, and this is what he cares about, is to write Torah, and the dedication to writing Torah, even when he's out there after being beaten by the communists, and as the story goes at length. And these are all the writings we have left of him, even though apparently he had written much more before, but it was burnt by the Russians when they arrested him. And all we have left is his notes in the margins of the books that she had brought to him. So it's his writings in her merit. Okay. More on that. Yeah. There's a video on our YouTube channel where I go through a biography on the Rebbe's father, and there I discuss more about this. Okay, so let's get into our subject at hand. Bottom of the page, I put some notes down as like prefatory notes. So I write, this is my writing here. Before we start, let's speak about 3 Kabbalistic ideas that are really somewhat connected. So you have to understand these concepts, and then we'll understand what Rabbi Levi is saying. Number 1 is the idea of the lines in Kabbalah, Kav, lines. So we all know that in Kabbalah there are 10 spheres, 10 divine spheres, 10 divine attributes, as you call them, or let's say archetypical characteristics through which the divine is manifest. Now, this system of 10 spheres is parallel in the human experience. We experience 10 faculties by which we interact with the world around us. In the same way, mirroring Hashem, that has these 10 faculties through which he interacts with us, creation. Okay, and these 10 are divided into 3 lines: right, left, center. The right, left, center, each respectively have a dominant characteristic trait. Right, left, and then the center is a blend between the right and the left. Good morning. So specifically for our subject, the right and the left. Right can be classified as outward flow. Right side is outward flow. Left is to constrain, to withhold, to introspect. So that's the right and the left. Outward, inward. And then the middle is a combination of the two, blending and balancing, giving versus withholding. That's the right, left, and the center in Kabbalah. Now, this right, left, and center exists on 3 tiers as you get more and more outward. So for the purposes of our conversation, we'll stick to the top 2 tiers. Then we can see here that the 3 tiers is on the right side, Chachma, Chesed, Netzach. Those are the 3 tiers on which you have the right side line of output. And then you have the left side, Beis, Gimel, Hey, Bina, Gvura, Hoid, on the 3 tiers of restraint, of withholding, of pulling back, outward, inward. Okay. So for the top 2 tiers, just quickly, the first tier is the intellectual. You have right, left on intellectual. And then you have on the emotional, right, left on the emotional. The right, left on the intellectual is Chachma versus Bina. Chachma is output because it's just an insight, it's inspiration. Something comes to you, an idea pops into one's head. There's a first flash of insight. So it's an output mechanism, creative. Bina, on the left side, is to rationalize and break down that concept. So it's to withhold. It's to say, hold on a second, where do you apply? Do you apply here? Yes, okay, we'll let you go. You don't apply here? Cut out. It discerns, it separates, it judges. Where do you belong, where don't you belong? So that's the right, left on the intellectual side. Chachma, Bina. On the emotional side, it's easier. Chesed is to give, and Gvura is to judge and say, no, you don't deserve, we're not giving you. Restrain, discipline, to withhold. Right? So you have the output, creative, and on the right side, and you have the withholding on the left side, the intellectual, that is analytic, which puts boundaries as to where intellectual ideas should go. And then the same thing on the emotional end. Chesed, I want to give, I feel like giving, and my heart is open, I just want to express all, I want to talk to everyone, share with everyone. And then Gvura on the other side says, hold on a second, is the person you're talking to deserving of your list of your words? Is the person you're talking to deserving of the money you're giving them? It's to withhold, it's to take back. The middle line is a blend between the two, which is the perfection, but we're not going to go there now. Okay, so this is concept number 1, right versus left. Concept number 2, which is of course linked, is what's referred to as Daled Moichin, the 4 compartments of the intellect. And they're reflected in the 4 compartments of our tefillin. Now they are, as I write down here, Chachma and Bina. Those are easy, the first 2 components of the intellect. The first 2 components of the intellect is the creative output, Chachma. What's the idea? What's the concept we're dealing with? That just comes in. Then you have number 2, moving to the left side, Bina, break down the idea. Right? And then you have Das. Now Das is, once you've concluded your analytics, what do you do with it? So it's the link to the emotional. Now that I have the concept from Chachma, I've broken it down using Bina. What's my conclusion? Well, my conclusion is one of 2 things. Either, I write here, is noite liyamin, I am prone to the right side. Having concluded this is a good thing, I'm now prone to desiring it. I haven't borne out the emotion yet, that I really love it and I want it. But my mind is telling me that's the appropriate direction. That's das, noita, which bends towards the right side. Then there is, the other conclusion could be, this is dangerous, this is no good, I better stay away. So I'm not emotionally afraid of it yet, but I'm noita l'smoil, my mind is telling me to bend toward the left. Okay, so it's chachma bina, creative, analytic, idea, breaking it down, and then in conclusion, either I want to go towards it or I want to stay away from it. The mind is bent toward the right or to the left. Those are the four components of the mind. That's the head tefillin. Concept number 2. Concept number 3 is something we learned about Shabbos afternoon when we were learning the Alter Rebbe's commentary on the Siddur on the Kegavna. We learned this idea of the way in which to sweeten the severity. Severe judgment comes from the left side. The left side says, hey, you're not deserving, don't touch, you don't get. Judgment, right? So negative experiences we have, God forbid, come from the divine gevura, from the left side. The divine judgment, which says, well, maybe you're misbehaving, so we're not going to give you. So how do you sweeten the judgments? You got to go back to moicha, you got to go back to the intellect. Just like in the human experience, right? Once the emotion is locked into judgment, it's very difficult to change it to then be more lax. The only way to do that is if I turn the emotion off, go back into my mind, rethink about it, and then through das, instead of this time going to the left, go to the right to be more kind. Redirected. So, but to redirect an emotion, I have to go back into the mind and how I perceive the idea. Mm-hmm. So we use the example when we learned that mind. Reverse the process, exactly. So we looked at Mimer, we used the example. The Mimer used the example of a person who gets angry at someone. Right? So someone did something to me and it hurts me. So I think about what that person did and I conclude that's horrible. I feel anger. Okay, anger is a negative emotion, which is not the divine. Divine, it's judgment, not anger. But still, we'll use that example. So how do I switch that anger to not be so angry? So I have to go back into how I thought about what happened to me. And instead of concluding what a horrible person, I conclude this guy probably had a hard day. Who knows what this guy went through? You know, maybe he did that because he's going through something. And now the same piece of information, if I rethought about, produces to the right side, I feel compassionate. I feel love toward that person. Doesn't mean I'm going to go embrace the guy. Maybe I'll go get him help if he's constantly being abusive. But at least in my emotional internally, I'm no longer burdened, so to speak, by being on the left side, which is judging. I can redirect it to the right side. But I can only do that if I go back into the mind, to the moichin. So this is a concept in Kabbalah that takas hagvuras, the sweetening of the severities, is done through reversal into moichin, into the intellect. So those are the 3 concepts you have to, by prefacing in order to understand what Rabbi Levi is about to teach us. Clear? Now let's get into Rabbi Levi's teaching. It's on the second page. So two paragraphs there. The context is not important, but we're going straight to his notes. Their notes are scattered, so they're selecting parts of larger dissertations that discuss KOS BROCHO. After the parentheses on the top, the KOS yayin sheba Pesach, the cups of wine on Pesach. So too the cups of wine on Pesach are in the realm of Gvura. Okay. Yayin u'pchinas Gvuras. Wine is Gvura. The judgment, the severity. That's what it represents. V'chein KOS, likewise cup, who mispar shem Elokim is the same numerical value as the name Elokim. KOS quickly is 26 and 60. That would be 86. Elokim, with a hey, not with a kuf, that's how you pronounce it correctly. Aleph is 1, 30, that's 31, 5, that's 36, 10, that's 46, another 40, that's 86. So KOS and Elokim are the same numerical value, which is Gvuras. Elokim is Gvuras, right? Yudke Vavke is Chesed, it's output, it's creative. Elokim is to restrain, where God hides himself, where God tempers the output that it be measured and limited and finite to the recipient. It's judging and so on. Okay, so we have wine is associated with Gvura and cup is associated with Gvura. Right? Now the yayin likewise, yayin as well. Mispar nukudoisov, maybe you can help me with this. The number of its vowels, gam kein pchinas Gvuras, is also Gvuras. Not sure how we get to that. Yayin has a patach and a chiruk, and somehow it gets to Gvuras. Any ideas?
Restraint and the strength.
Patach and Chiruk, let's say maybe it's a numerical number. Patach, Pays, Pei, Tef, Ches is 488. Okay, keep that. Let's hold that number. 488. Chiruk, Ches Yud 18, Reish 218, Yud 228, Kuf 328. What was the first number? 488. And what was the number I just said? 318. 48. Okay, hold 48. And 18, 218, 228, 328. 328 and 488. What's 328 and 48? Anyone? 328 and 48? We're all terrible. Okay. Calculator right out. Sorry? What's our number? 488 plus 328 equals 816. And Gvuros is 4, 600, 62, 65, 12 is, no, we're falling short. Falling short. I'm not sure. If someone knows, they can share it with us. Okay, continuing. So wine is gvura. The cup is gvura. Mitzvah men muflar. The primary way to do the mitzvah, as we learned, is yain edom, is red wine, and mara edom, the color red, very yichud. Specifically, remez al gvura also alludes to gvura. Okay, so we have cup, wine, gvura. Moreover, ubeh dalat kois gufa. When we look at the 4 cups of wine on the Seder night, ha'ikr v'achidush, the primary unique feature of sheyesh b'koisis the Pesach that we have in the cups of Pesach, masha'ein ze b'chol hashana, which doesn't exist in the rest of the year. What are the unique cups of the Seder night? What are the unique cups of the Seder night? U'kois hasheni, the kois haravi is the second cup and the 4th cup. She'ein b'chol hashana, which doesn't exist in the rest of the year. Why is that? Masha'ein ken kois the kiddush, right? The 4 cups of wine. The first is kiddush. The second one is over which we recite the Haggadah. The third one is over which we recite the grace after meals, the benching, and the 4th over which we do the Hallel. So which 2 are the unique ones of the Seder night? Number 2 and 4, right? The Mashenk and Kois, the Kiddush, the cup of Kiddush, the first cup, Yesh Negam b'Shabbos and Yom Tov. We have Kiddush and Shabbos and Yom Tov. Kois the Bechas HaMazen, the third cup, which is the cup we recite over benching, Yesh Nebechal Hashanah Gamken. We also have all year long. So what are the unique ones? Is number 2 and number 3 is the one we say at the Haggadah, and the third one which we say Hallel. We don't have anywhere else in the entire year where we say Hallel with a cup of wine, right? Nor do we have Haggadah all year. Okay, on these 2 cups, number 2 and 3, Dafka specifically, we say the Haggadah and Hallel, and Sipri Tis Mitzrayim, relating the story of the Exodus. So these 3 things. I'm not sure why it divides it, but the 2 does. And these 3 are the 3 left sides of Moichin. So remember, we explained that Moichin has 4 components. Chachma, the creative, and as you get more left, you become more and more breaking down. Bina, you're going leftward. You're going again leftward to Chesed and then Gvura. But here he says that because these are all on the left side, it's Bina and what's called Itra de Gvura. Itra de Gvura means the side of Gvura of severity. Correct, but when you go in the Dal Moichin, when you go in the 4 cup, when you go in the 4 intellect, you start going left. Chesed coming after Bina, even though it's a lower tier, which is on the right side, but it only comes after the breakdown of Bina. Right? Although it's really a Chesed. We'll become clear soon in a minute. Okay, but more specifically, now, Hadal Koises, Hemadal Moichin Shemabina. Kiyadua. The 4 cups of wine, just to answer your question, are the 4 components of Moichin. Chesed, Gvur. So number 1 is Chesed, number 2 is Gvura. Number 1 is Chachma, number 2 is Bina, number 3 is Chesed, number 4 is Gvura. Now, which ones are the 2 ones that we said were unique for this night, the Seder? 2 and 4, which are Bina and Gvura, both on the left side. So Elu Abeis and Bina Gvura, These two that are unique to the Seder night, which is cup number 2 and cup number 4, are both Bina and Gvura on the left side. Hare, so the result of all this is, Sha'ikr the KOS, the primary of the cups of wine, the Seder night, Hingam Kim Pchinas Gvura, are all about Gvura. Cup is Gvura, associated with Elokim. Wine is Gvura, red wine is Gvura, and the unique cups of the Seder night, cup number 2 and number 4, are on that on the 4 levels of Chachma, are the left side parts of that. Bina and Gvura. 2 Bina, 4 Gvura. So we're getting a theme here. And he makes a citation. You should see my notes elsewhere. Now,
is it from his notes?
Yes. Yeah. 4th to last line in that first paragraph. So we see the whole idea of Pesach, which is now to the broader context of this note, besides the cups of wine. Heina Pesach atzmei, both the Pesach offering itself, v'hamatzah and the matzah, and the maror, certainly, v'hakoises, kol zeu b'chinas gvuras, the Pesach offering, the matzah, the maror, the cups, all are gvuras. Moreover, Harasha Tevis, the first letters of the words Pesach, matzah, maror, koises, the first letters are Pei is 80, Mem is 120, Mem again is 160, another 40, and the 8 and the chaf, the fourth, the chaf is 20, so that's 180. Follow that? Pei is 80, Mem is 40, it's 120, Mem another 40, 160, chaf another 20, 180. Ukuf Pei, this is 180. Minyan Shnei Chaya Yitzchak, which is the exact number of years that Yitzchak lived. Yitzchak is Gvuras. Avram is Chesed, Yitzchak Gvura, Yaakov in the middle. So Yitzchak is Gvura again. And Yitzchak, no, the Pesach. Yitzchak was born on Pesach. So again, we're linking up all of Pesach night with Gvura. In the 4 cups of wine, in which cups of wine are added on the Seder night that you don't have the other nights, on the fact that it's a cup, on the fact that it's wine, the fact that it's red wine, on the first letters of all the unique mitzvahs of the night, Pesach, Matzah, Maror, and Kosos, and on the fact that Yitzchak lived 180 years, which is connected to those 4, and that Yitzchak was born on Pesach. Yitzchak being Gvuda. So the whole experience is a Gvuda experience.
Red is also symbolized.
Red is also Gvuda. Sounds very harsh, Pesach night. We're not done. These are severities that have been sweetened in chesed. Now, in this section, it doesn't explain how that is.
Well, the other cups, no?
How they get elevated. But remember before we said that the sweetening of the severity happens by going back into the intellect. So we have to somehow, these gvudos have to be reabsorbed, as it were, into the intellect, to be reconsidered, and therefore the output becoming chesed. Now we have already a sense as to how this happens, because again, where is this gvura that we're doing? It's in the Dalad Moichin, it's in the 4 intellect. That's right, but the 4 cups that he described are Bina and Gvura, it's all within the intellectual sphere, right? Because the 4 Moichin, it's the 4 components of the intellect. So we're already seeing how the gvura here, the judgment here, is not as its output into the emotional and therefore stuck there, but it's the gvura that's in the intellect, which can be sweetened by an extra infusement of chesed. And that's where the KOS shel BROCHO comes in. KOS itself, we said before, is gvura. A cup itself is gvura. But when it's a cup of BROCHO, when a cup of blessing, that cup, the gvura, gets elevated to be chesed. That's the KOS shel BROCHO element. So the idea of KOS shel BROCHO is to take gvura, which is represented by the wine and by the cup, and to bring it into bracha, to bring it into blessing, to sweeten the severity, which is why it has to be raised up. KOS Yeshuas Esa, a cup of salvation you have to raise. You have to raise up the gvura that goes into the moichin, that goes into the intellect, so that it's sweetened. Follow? So let's see how that is, and he explains specifically related to KOS shel BROCHO in the next paragraph there. Okay, after the parentheses. He's quoting from the Zohar, where the Zohar says that the Yehuda met Ze'ira, and he told Ze'ira that I learned from your father 2 things. Lama b'menu b'kisa de bracha. He learned about KOS shel BROCHO, cup of a blessing.
From the Gemara? From one of the sons.
Not Yehuda from the Mishnah. Many years later, from the Gemara's era.
You're not Nasi.
No, way later. It's not Nasi in the Mishnah. Yehuda is a little later. Okay, so Yehuda says that he met Zeira. The Gemara, the Zohar says Yehuda met Zeira and he asked him about his father, and he said, "Look, I learned from your father two things. I learned from your father about Koshel Bracha, and I learned from your father about the works of creation, Ma'aseh Bereshis." So explains Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. Elu Abeis Varim. These two things, Koshel Bracha and Ma'aseh Bereshis, creation, Shneim Shayachim L'Bchinas Chasadim, are all about Chesed, the Bracha element. Koshel Bracha, because when you make a cup of Bracha, you're holding a cup for Kiddush or for benching, whatever. It has to be placed into your right hand, which is Chesed, right side Chesed. Yeah. And the citation to Zohar, then he says, L'chein Koshel Bracha, mitzdaref l'toiva v'loyer He's making a reference to our Gemara, which we haven't learned yet, but the Gemara says later. There is something that the Gemara refers to as zugos, pairs. Doing something in pairs has negative implication. So the Gemara asks, if pairs have negative implication, how could you have 4 cups of wine that's pairs? The Gemara gives a few answers, and one of the answers is, because these cups are cup of bracha, therefore when they combine for good and not for bad. So ordinary cups of wine that aren't for bracha would be negative, especially in pairs. It's gvura to begin with, and then it's in pairs. That's right.
I couldn't remember how many he had.
That's right.
Sorry.
But then the koshel bracha, the cup of the bracha, turns that combination into a chesed, into a blessing.
The pair becomes a couple.
When the pair becomes koshel bracha, a cup of blessing.
Right.
Okay, so now we have koshel bracha, now chesed. Now it continues. This is because the reason why it combines for good is because koshel bracha is chesed, cup of blessing is chesed. Therefore, combines only for good, not for negative. Moreover, when again, which cups are the unique Pesach cups? 2 and 4. 2 and 4 are the two ones that become the pair, and they're the ones that are unique for the Seder night, and they're the ones that are koshel bracha to turn the negative, which was pairs, into good. Right?
They have a symbiosis between the two of them.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. The unique. Again. Sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. 2 and 4, you're right, is gvura. But here, the koshel bracha specifically, of all the 4 of them, is the cup over which you make benching. That's the koshel bracha. And the cup of bracha is number 3. Number 3 is which one? Chachma, Bina, Chesed. So number 3, which is the unique koshel bracha of all the Seder night, is dafka Chesed, so that it sweetens all the other 4.
So coupled together, it becomes sweet.
Sorry?
Coupled together, it becomes that.
It becomes sweetened because it's koshel bracha, and because koshel bracha has been inserted here as number 3, which is the Chesed of the 4. Follow? Following? Where we stuck? Where did we get stuck?
I thought the
2 and 4 are unique to Pesach night.
Those are the ones that are gevura.
Those are the ones that are gevura.
And because they're in pairs, they get elevated to.
No, the pairs is a reason to make it negative.
But not if it's a bracha.
But it's koshel bracha, correct. And which one's the koshel bracha here? Of all the 4 of them, which one's the most uniquely koshel bracha? The one over which you do benching. That's the ultimate koshel bracha. That's the classic koshel bracha. The one over which you do the gift of the meals. That's right. And that's number 3. And that's correct. So the koshel bracha here, uniquely, the unique koshel bracha here is the cup over which you make the bracha of thanking Hashem for food. That would be the benching. And that's number 3. And number 3 is chesed here.
3 is chesed in that.
Chachma, Bina, and then chesed. And the 4 compartments of the mind, number 3 is chesed. Right? Yadal, because the 4 cups in the negative, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gvura. Because then the 4 components, the 4 cups are corresponding to these 4 components, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, and Gvura. And therefore the third one would be Chesed. The one you do over benching is Chesed. That's the unique koshel bracha. So inserting number 3, Chesed, over which koshel bracha is done, then all those 4 become elevated to being a bracha. Especially since these 4 are the ema. They are the 4 of the intellect. Ki yadu as is known. And therefore,
Chesed's considered intellect, though?
no, okay, intellect sweetens the judgment, right? By bringing the judgment back into intellect, it gets
Oh,
sweetened.
that's what you were saying earlier.
Exactly.
You have
And
to go
therefore,
back into the mind.
correct. And therefore, masho kois yayin. Now, the fact that these 4 cups of wine are done over a cup and wine, which we said before, roim is al gvuras, both cup and wine is gvura, right? But kosher bracha makes it sweetened. It explains to me, pneishu chesed de'ema, because it's chesed that's in the intellect. And therefore, this kois and yayin, which is ordinarily gvura, by being elevated into the intellect, is now sweetened. And specifically by the number 3 there, which is the third of them, the unique kosher bracha, which elevates them all to becoming sweetened. Follow?
This I'm having a hard time understanding that Chesed is in the mind.
It's right because we said, so let's explain the 4 compartments of the mind. You have Chachma Bina, which is the creative, and the Bina is the intellect. But then there is the mind's decision as to which way am I going to go. Before I actually feel the emotion of Chesed or Gvura, it's which way I'm inclined to go. I've come to the conclusion this is a good thing, and therefore I'm inclined to deciding to love it. I come to the conclusion it's not a good thing, I'm inclined to being afraid of it. So it's not necessarily emotion yet, but it's the mind's decision as to which way to go. And you have to go back there to sweeten the judgment. Follow? Yeah. So because if it was chesed itself, it wouldn't have the ability to change gvura. But because it's chesed in intellect, therefore it has the capacity to change also the negative, the gvura. Right? And that's why it's the 3rd cup of wine, which is the chesed, which is in the intellectual system that can elevate them all into kosher bracha, turning which was ordinarily negative. Cup, wine, and pears, which are negative, because it's kosher bracha. And because it's number 3, it's chesed in the intellect, therefore can change them all into sweetened. Okay? And this is Gamal Derech. This is similar to Elikim birav chazdach. It's a pasuk which says Elikim in your abundant kindness, which seems like an inherent contradiction. Elikim, we said before, is judgment, is severity, but then it's saying abundant kindness. What's going on? This explains shebirav chazdecha, when it's abundant kindness, not regular kindness. Regular kindness is locked in the emotional kindness, chesed. But abundant kindness is kindness in its higher state in the intellect. And therefore, when it's in Rav Chazdecha, when it's in the abundant kindness, which is a reference to the intellectual kindness, nimtik gam shem elakim devuris, then can be sweetened even elakim, which is gvura. Because it's a Rav Chesed, not ordinary Chesed. Rav Chesed, which is an elevated version of Chesed. Correct. We learned also on Shabbos, same idea. It's correct. When it's in Rav Chesed, when it's in abundant Chesed, not Chesed that it's locked into an emotional thing, but Chesed as its a decision to say we can be Chesedic, then that can also elevate the Gvura, also elevate Elokim. Right? The same thing is true of creation. Right? We said before that Rabbi Yehuda learned 2 things from Zeira. He learned about Kosher Bracha and he learned about Ma'aseh Bereishis to creation. Now we're learning what's Kosher Bracha. Kosher Bracha is to sweeten judgments, to take Kos, which is judgment, and turn it into Bracha by elevating it into the intellectual sphere. And the same thing is true of creation. Now we're learning also, because creation happens through Elokim, breaking down judgment, but it's Elokim that it's to be sweetened, as he explains. Yeah, what do you say?
The 3rd compartment then is not just Chesed, which is the emotional part, it's Rav Chesed.
That's correct. The 3rd compartment is Rav Chesed. It's Chesed that is still in the intellectual and therefore has the capacity, or Chesed that's been elevated to the intellectual sphere. Shifted from I'm stuck in being Chesed. Correct, and that's correct. I'm stuck in being Chesed or I'm stuck in being Gvura. Shifted to something which is more malleable, and therefore can rethink about it and say, well, let's go Chesed ways. It's Chesed in the broader sense, not Chesed in stuck in an emotional sense. Because when you're stuck in an emotional sense, it's very difficult to switch. I feel Chesed toward this current person, and I feel Gvura to that person. But if I go back to Rav Chesed, then even someone who's in a Gvura state can be brought into Chesed.
That's how we mimic Hashem.
That's correct. In the kosher bracha attitude. That's right. Taking kos and turning it into bracha. Okay. Now, the same thing is true of Ma'aseh Bereishis to creation. Whom mipchinas chesed comes from chesed. As we say, the pasuk says, "Ki amarti olam chesed yibana." God said, "I created the world in kindness. It's built in kindness." Chesed yibana. Uchemaimer, as we say every day in davening, uvetuvoy, and in His goodness, chesed mechadesh, He renews b'chol yom every day. Talmud continuously Ma'aseh Bereishis to acts of creation. So we refer to the renewal of creation as toiv, who chesed, which is chesed. Okay, but it's even though it's created by Elokim, it's a chesed Elokim. Right. Now, Kosha bracha, the cup of bracha, is also linked to the creation, to the process of creation, which is the sweetening of judgment, the sweetening of Gvura. Because the 5 fingers upon which the cup is rested, right? You have to put your cup down like that. That's been learned on the 5 fingers. And the neged, they correspond to Hahe Tevin, the 5 letters, 5 words, Shemeshem Elakim, Tanina, Achem Elakim Plisa. They correspond to the 5 letters that are between the second Elakim and the third Elakim. HaKOS Bereish Parshas Bereishis mentioned at the beginning of Parshas Bereishis. See the introduction to the Zohar. So what's he referring to? With me so far? Okay, we're going to come back to all of it. So let's look at page 3. The first 3 psukim of the Torah. The psukim begin. Bereishis bara Elakim es hashamayim v's'aretz. In the beginning, God created. The third word being Elakim, God. And now count the letters between the first Elakim to the second. Eis, Hashamayim, the Eis, Haaretz, V'haaretz, Haisa, Tayu, Vavayu, V'choshech, Al, Pnei, Tahoim, V'ruach. 13 letters between Elakim 1 and Elakim 2. Now between Elakim 2 and 3. V'rachefes, Al, Pnei, Hamoyim, Vayomer, 5. So you have 13 letter words between Elakim 1 and Elakim 2, and 5 letters between Elakim 2 and Elakim 3. Now let's read the Zohar's introduction, opening words of the Zohar. In English, Rabbi Chizkiah opened, it is written as a rose amongst the thorns. What is a rose? It is a congregation of Israel, because there is a rose and there is a rose. Just as the rose amongst the thorns is tinged with red and white, red being ches, gvura, and white being chesed. Right? So is the congregation of Israel affected by the qualities of judgment and mercy, chesed and gvura, red and white. Just as a rose has 13 petals, the assembly of Israel is surrounded on all sides by 13 attributes of mercy. So it's sweetening the negative, sweetening the judgment. Thus, between the first mentions of the name Elohim in the Torah, these 13 words surround and guard the congregation of Israel. Okay, so the 13 letters between Elohim and Elohim, Elohim is gvura, right? But between them, we have references to kindness. So between the Elohim 1 and Elohim 2, which is gvura, you have 13 words, which are the 13 attributes of kindness, sweetening the judgment. The 13 petals to the rose that's thorned. Yeah. And then continues the Zohar.
Says 13 petals?
Yeah. So the Zohar puts it. I never counted petals on rose, but that's what the Zohar talks about. Yeah. So after, sorry? Rabbi Steinsaltz has a book called The 13 Petal Rose, beautiful book. Which is beautiful. If someone wants to be introduced to Kabbalah on its basic level, if someone wants to be introduced to Kabbalah on its basic level, read Rabbi Steinsaltz, a 13-petaled rose, absolutely. Okay, after this continues the Zohar, the name of Elohim is written again in the text. And why is it mentioned again? In order to bring out 5 rigid leaves that surround the rose, 5 gevuras. Right? There's actually 5 gevura and 5 chesed, because chesed is on the right and gevura is on the left, represented by the hands, and you have 5 fingers. So the 5 fingers represent implementation of the right or left side. So implementation of chesed has 5, and implementation of gvura has 5. And you want the 5 implementation of gvura to be sweetened by the 5 implementation of kindness. Okay. So now, in order to bring out the 5, so we have 5 letter words now between Elohim number 1 and Elohim number 2 and Elohim number 3. Continues the Zohar. Because in order to bring out the 5 rigid leaves, that is the gvura side, that surrounded a rose. And these 5 represent the 5 gates of salvation. The 5 on the right side. And this secret is written in the verse, I will raise the cup of salvation. KOS Yeshuas Esa. Raise up a cup of salvation. This is what we're talking about here. KOS Shel Bracha raises that which is KOS, which is Gvura, and red, which is Gvura, to turn into Bracha, with a hand that has 5 fingers to raise them up, that to be sweetened. This is the cup of benediction, which is raised after a meal. The cup of benching, the 3rd cup of the Seder night, 3rd being Chesed, which is again all about sweetening the judgment. Right? The cup of benediction must rest on 5 fingers and no more, meaning don't hold it with 2 hands, hold it with 1. Just as a rose rests on 5 rigid leaves. And this rose is the cup of benediction. From the 2nd to the 3rd mention of the name Elohim in the Torah, there are 5 words. The 5 words sweetening the Elohims. So we see here a link between creation, the acts of creation, and that creation comes through Elohim, But embedded in the lakin, you have the 13 attributes of mercy. You have the 5 fingers, which gets elevated to sweeten the judgments associated with the kosher bracha, the cup of a blessing, which is benching, which is to thank Hashem for food. That is to say, to elevate that which conceals Hashem, to reveal Hashem, elevates judgment into mercy, taking the 3rd cup of wine, the chesed, and using that 3rd cup of wine, which is chesed, to make the kosher bracha, which is all about elevating the 4 cups of wine in the whole, all of which would have been negative, especially on Pesach night, where the 2 unique cups are cup 2 and 4, which are gvura, but all of that through the 3rd cup, through chesed, through the elevation of kosher bracha, is elevated into the sphere of the intellect, and thus reanalyzed and reframed, so that the output is now chesed. Thus, every kosher bracha is about elevating the gvura and turning it into chesed. Certainly the Seder night, the kosher bracha, is even more so, because all of Pesach, we said before, was gvura. Yitzchak is gvura, the Pesach is gvura, KOS is gvura, yayin is gvura, red wine is gvura. But by making it all in kosher bracha, especially with cup number 3, the cup of benching, which is the cup we've been learning about in the last few days in the Gemara, about the cup of benching, it's all about elevating it, raising it up into the intellect to sweeten the judgment. So you see, this is really, you saw only 10 lines, how every detail for Rabbi Levi comes absolutely perfect. The 3rd cup and the name Yitzchak, the numerical value of yayin, everything has to line up. There's still some things that we didn't fully explain. Specifically, if someone could explain how the nekudos of yayin are also somehow, the number of the nekudos in yayin are somehow also gvura. I'm not sure how.
What is that?
Nekudos, the number of the vowels on yayin are somehow gvuras. I'm not sure how. The vowels. And as far as I can see, the vowels on yayin are patach and chiruk. Yayin. I'm not sure what I'm missing here. Somehow that reaches gvura. Someone can help me. I would love to. And specifically says mispar, the number of the nekudos. Maybe 2, and gvuras is 2 somehow, but it's not. Gvura was number 4. I'm not sure if someone can help me with that. That'd be nice. But I hope this gives us a better appreciation of the Kabbalah, of what we're learning about the kosher bracha and the uniqueness of this kosher bracha, which I guess would also lend us to understand why there's so many details about the kosher bracha. Why it can't be pogum, for example. We're learning about pogum. Can't be pogum. If you want to sweeten the judgments, right? If you add if it's tampered with, then it's kind of maybe stuck in the gvura mode. Has to be purely elevated into its pure state, right? We said before, once you're locked in a certain emotion, it's hard to change it, right? So once you've tampered with the wine and brought the gvura down into a place of negative, pogum, too late. Can't be pogum. It has to be, you gotta add more wine to reinvigorate it with new ideas, new investor, and then it could be sweetened, perhaps, right? So all these different details, perhaps suggesting all details we're learning about the kosher bracha, the halachas, are all to sustain this process of taking that which is gvura, elevating it into the intellectual sphere, and rearranging output for chesed. And on a personal level, the takeaway we have is we could do this on our own. When we're feeling a negative emotion, whatever that negative emotion is, a judgment, an anger, discomfort, we have to go back into ourselves and ask ourselves, why are we feeling this way? And maybe we can rethink about it in such a way that the output comes out as chesed. In doing this kosher bracha process. That's in bina. It's taking gvura back into bina and chesed into bina, into the 4 compartments of intellect, rather than stuck in an emotional state where I can't change how I feel.
To temper it in such a way, that's where we must have a connection with the kudot. The kudot must be with regard to what the pronouncement will be. The pronouncement will be.
Right. The kudah is already a stuck pronouncement.
What the pronouncement will be, how we formulate the pronouncement. Right.
Whereas you can rearrange it if you went back.
Exactly.
That's very good. Yeah, thank you. Very good. Okay, here's a little taste of Levi's teaching related somewhat to what we are learning in the Gemara. And God willing, tomorrow, we were discussing here the other day about the Alkane, all those paragraphs, where it comes from.
Yeah.
God willing, tomorrow we'll discuss that. As I mentioned, I would look up in a book called Shara Koilel, written by my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Rabbi Avdom David Lavut, who's the chief rabbi of Yakatir Nislav, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, whom we are, right? Am I mixing this up?
That was on your.
Yes, I am mixing it up. Avram David Lavut was the chief rabbi of Nikolaev, not Ukrainian. I'm sorry, like not Nikolaev, but the Avram David Lavut is Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's wife's grandfather. Yes, it's her mother's father. Sorry? Yeah, so there's a relation here. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneersohn's wife, Rabbi Tzimchana, her mother is Rachel, and her father was Rabbi Avram David Lavut. He was the Rav in Nikolaev, and he wrote a sefer called Shara Koilel, which is a commentary on the Alter Rebbe Siddur. So I said I would look up there to see what he writes about Al-Kain, that whole paragraph that we say before the thing, and he does explains it both on the halachic level and the Kabbalistic level. So God willing, we will look at that tomorrow, and then we'll get back to our Gemara. Okay, have a wonderful day, Yidden. And as per the Rebbe's request, he asked that we learn from his Torah, which we did, from Rebbe's father's Torah, and he also requested that we give tzedakah in his name. He established a specific fund called Keren Levi Yitzchak, the fund of Levi Yitzchak in his father's memory. And searching online, Keren Levi Yitzchak, it'll come up, and donate a little bit in honor of his memory and in fulfillment of Rebbe's request that we do so. Have a wonderful day, Eden.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.